the Education, Technology, and Student Services meeting to order. And we will start with a Pledge of Allegiance and moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Since this is a new committee format, we are starting fresh with this school year, so we actually do not have any minutes to approve. And we do have a public comment period, however. Is there anyone signed up for public comment? Okay, no one has signed up. So I just want to mention that for my board colleagues, that this is a little bit different format than what we're used to. We are going to have this presented as a workshop, so we really will not be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Stout, but we will really not be moving anything forward today. This is just informational workshop.
That is correct. Actually, this is part of a two-part workshop process. So the goal is to utilize our vision, mission, goal work, and how that will connect to the support the board can provide to the district.
Okay, and all of the information, everything that we have covered tonight for those board members who, for whatever reason, could not be in attendance, will be on the website, and everything that will be going over tonight will be posted to our board docs for those people who aren't here, correct?
The only thing that is not on there right now is the presentation, but I will make sure that it gets uploaded because we were working on that up to the 11th hour.
That's fine, but it will be uploaded for people to look at. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Stout, who I might add has been working very hard, even over the holiday weekend, to put a really good, robust presentation together for us. So, Mr. Stout.
I do like that word robust, by the way. So I need to be completely truthful. When we had a board meeting last Tuesday night with this new super committee process, I realized on Tuesday night that this upcoming Tuesday was going to be our first super committee. So we worked very diligently to make sure that we had something that was going to be a useful tool for us to move forward. And I say that in the sense that we have worked very hard with our new vision, mission, goal dashboard. So that is the framework of where we're starting tonight. The hope is that our work, and I thought I was going to actually walk around in workshop format, but I won't be mic'd, so that's not typically my style. So I will just kind of follow along with our presentation. But the goal is that we have an updated Boyer Tennery School District mission statement to suggest the articulation of a district vision statement. And again, this is all kind of redundant from what we've gone over recently. Dr. Bedden has given the school board the key work of School Board's Guidebook by NSBA. So the new mission statement will reflect a unified and clear reason for the district's existence and corresponds to the 4-year criteria given by the NSBA. We will also have updated priority statements that have been transformed into 4 goal statements. Our elimination of the strategies and metrics of success from the dashboard and house them in a revised building level action plan, which you will see tonight. And we also have a redesign of our dashboard, which you have all been aware of over the course of the past couple weeks. That has been some foundational work from this summer. The timeline, again, you have seen this in the past. We have adhered to this timeline along the way, so I'm kind of impressed with my colleagues who absolutely work behind the scenes to help support this, but also the school board to support moving forward with our dashboard. You can see the dates, and again, we've adhered to those dates. On the second page, you will see 2 new additional dates that are added since the board approval last Tuesday night. For the Education, Technology, Student Services Committee meeting workshop, we have tonight's workshop for 9/3, and we also have the workshop for 10/1, which will be upcoming in October. as we had looked at in the past, to celebrate the work that had transpired over the years. We have our previous board district dashboard as far as our lack of vision, but having a mission statement and looking at our strategic metrics as well as our priority areas. And what you approved last Tuesday night was our vision, mission, and our goal statement that focuses on taking the information from the past to understand the past, to plan for the present, and look to the future as far as helping to support our district. So one of the things that we do from an instructional basis is really look at creating learning targets for our classrooms. So the reason, and I blame all of this on Dr. Bedden, because I asked for permission to change the format a little bit of our meetings so that we're not sitting in a U and we're doing it more workshop oriented. And Dr. O'Barrow and I tried to set up the room a few hours ago, but realized we're under the constraints of the microphone cords. So we had limited flexibility as far as how we could do this. So between the skirt that's about 30 feet long and the microphone cables and plugs, it was just, I was sweating. It was a difficult process. But in the end, the hope was that we move with a workshop approach to really look at learning targets. And like I started off the statement earlier, when we ask our classroom teachers to really think about what they want their kids to know, we have classroom teachers present learning targets. And oftentimes they're in the format of an I can statement. So the I can statements that are targeted for the 9-3 are focused in green, and then we have the I can statement for 10-1. So the goal by the time we leave tonight that the school board will be able to identify the roles and responsibilities of the school board. They can create an initial understanding of accountability of where our school board is on this essential work. And finally, they will complete a self-assessment to determine the degree in which the school board achieved a set of elements towards establishing measures of accountability to support overall student growth and achievement. Most of the information, like I said, the foundation work is from our previous vision, mission, goal work, as well as our NSBA information. Finally, for our presentation for 10-1, we're looking at the school board coming together collaboratively to actually create their own criterion matrix for the school board that will be a evaluative tool to assess whether the school board has achieved their 4 goals. So the goal is to walk away with using the exact same action planning template that is customized to the school board to help support their decision-making process to help support the district. Again, just looking at what our future outcomes will be, we'll have an enhanced clarity and focus in district purpose. We'll have an increased focus on desired district cultural attributes. We'll have an alignment among vision, mission, overall district goals, and building level targets. We'll have an enhanced alignment of district resources with specific needs. We'll have a focus and clarity of objectives for discussions and decisions. And finally, ongoing performance monitoring, evaluation, and discussion. You're getting all of that out of this workshop. Little did you know when you walked in today.
Can I get a certificate?
You can get a certificate. We can print them in black and white. We can't print them in color, but we will print them in black and white. I'm just going to kind of go through this relatively quickly because you all have the handbook. So literally what we did was we created these are the bullet points for what the responsibilities of the school board is or are with respect to their role. So each one of these targets here, and I'll pull them all down here, is directly from page, I believe it's 27, of the summary of roles and responsibilities for the school board. So I won't read them out loud for you, but you can look over them. And since I know all of you have studied your handbook, you probably have them all memorized at this particular time. Take a moment before I move forward. Everybody good? And there's a few more here. Like I said, there's overall 11 measures that the NSBA provides as a summary of the roles of the school board. Now, here is where it gets fun. And we have Dr. Obero and Jen Joyce from the Office of Teaching and Learning. They are going to help support this. What we wanted to do, we wanted to model some tools that we might utilize within the school district to help support collaboration. So what you see is a bit.ly. And a bit.ly, the HTTP up there, is really a shortened web address. So if we want kids, students, adults to have a quicker way to type in the resource, you create a bit.ly, and what it does is it takes the longer web address and makes it short so it's easier to pull up. This is where I'm not really sure what the school board members tonight are going to link to. I know what you're going to, but your accessibility. I invited each and every one of you using your Google email account, which you probably aren't even aware that you have a Google email account, but you all have been invited to this survey, as well as a Google Classroom, which we will get to shortly. So again, you'll get to see that. But this survey, in your packet for this week, we created an accountability self-assessment. So what we're going to do is go through, and each one of you is going to complete. Mr. Foose, you were on. I see that. See, that's why I knew having you right next to me, I would have more accountability to my learner, right? You've already completed the survey. That's exactly. So that's good that you can get in. That's a celebration, because I wasn't sure, because again, I don't think any of you had gotten into your Google accounts. But what you see, and right out of your handbook from page 26, and you were given this information in your packet, there is a survey. Basically, there are, I think, 10 questions, and you look at fully achieved, mostly achieved, partially achieved, beginning to achieve, or don't know, or unsure. What we're going to do is we're going to ask you to answer the 10 questions, and then in the end, you are going to see live data from the board tonight in graph format to show how the school board feels they are evaluating themselves, or we as a district, in this process. So like I said, we're going to float around and just kind of look over your shoulders to make sure everybody is in a good spot, and those of you who aren't, we will provide support to get you where you need to be. Okay?
You want us to start filling this in?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, since I think everybody has had the opportunity to complete the survey, we're going to move forward. And because now you are Google One level certified, that's a joke for those who know. We're going to move forward in our presentation, and I am going to share with you another bit.ly link that is going to have you probably join your very first Google Classroom. So another tool that our classroom teachers utilize very often is a Google Classroom. And a Google Classroom, for lack of a better term, is just a simple way to warehouse information for students. Within that classroom, which I'll show you shortly, within the classroom is actually various resources. There could be surveys, there could be assessments, there could be assignments, there could be different things there. So if you take a moment, and type in the bit.ly that is up there, it's going to take you to a classroom. You may be asked for this classroom code, which we can put on the board for you, and I'm going to show you what exactly is in the Google Classroom so you can actually see that you've joined your first classroom and have resources available to you to access at a different time.
If I type it right, it's telling me to sign in with my Google account.
Yeah, and that might be where we need to have your Google email address. Yeah, and that could be a little hiccup because you guys probably haven't gotten in there yet to do that. Yeah.
Where is?
Well, we would know what it is.
Yeah, it would be .student.
Yeah, at students, so it would be at students.
How secure is it?
You typed the bit.ly again?
No, you would use your school.
Or you typed it again?
The new one.
Yep.
Oh, I didn't see that there was a new one.
Yep.
Oh, gotcha, okay. I didn't see it now, okay.
If you take a minute to look at the on the screen, this is what a Google Classroom looks like. And I can probably say, Dr. Benton, for the very first time, this is one of those things we hadn't really thought about too much, but as we think about our letterhead and all of those pieces, our new vision statement will be placed on all of our new documents. So I took the liberty to actually take our vision statement and put it as the header to our Google Classroom. So this might be the first time you actually see it in a Boyertown link, a Boyertown access point where to cultivate an exceptional, innovative learning community that enables all students to succeed in a changing world. So that is the ribbon header that goes across the Google Classroom. I'll take another minute to get everybody on board and then we're good. So it's probably easier if you, oh, Mrs. Torsha, you had a question? Do you want to come up to the microphone? Mrs. Torsha is a Google expert, I'd like to just point out. It's now on film. So if you take a moment to look up at the screen, it's probably easier and I can show you how this is manipulatable. But within this Google Classroom, like I shared with you before, in the classroom is just a way to warehouse information for students, for adults, whoever it might be. So if I go to my people, all of the people that I assigned to this classroom are called students. So you can see, I can tell who's logged in and who hasn't. It's just Dr. Bedden is the only external person besides the board members, and you can see who actually is, who has accessed the classroom. What's kind of cool about this, when you get to utilize it for a classroom perspective, you can invite a guardian. So a parent can oversee and monitor the work that's happening within the classroom, which is kind of a nice feature that Google provides. Within the stream is, for lack of a better term, a posting area where you can put information for students, for adults to access. So the stream is a very quick, brief overview of accessibility for your information for students. So in the information here, Mr. Wales actually posted the Google Form survey that you completed earlier. So if I click on that, remember, you are potentially a student, you have access to the survey. So I completed that, put the assignment in the classroom for you. If I go back to my main stream here, another resource that I put here for all of you to have, which by the way is part of your information that was given to you in the weekly report, with the exception of this presentation for tonight, because like I said, we were completing it up to the 11th hour today, but you have your a copy of your poster for our dashboard. You have access to that in the classroom. I posted that for you. Here's an exciting moment that is a foreshadow for October 1st. This is going to be the Boyertown Area School District School Board Action Plan tool. So what we're looking at doing is providing some foundational work tonight, and then moving forward with having the school board create their own priorities based upon the 4 goals that are in our vision, mission, goal work. So we're excited about having that be the next step in the process.
Are you on that? I went.
Yep, just the arrow. Yep, you're back on the main. And the last thing I posted in here, and Dr. Bedden, I will make sure that you have this, is the, I'll extract it as a PowerPoint presentation. A PDF, yep, and then we keep it as a solid. So the presentation for tonight is also posted in the classroom. So wanted to take this opportunity tonight to really give you some background as to how we utilize technology in the classroom, how we support our instruction in the classroom, but make it relevant to all of the hard work that the administrative team has worked on to get to this point with our new dashboard. Does anybody have any questions about the Google Classroom itself, about the functionality of it, what kinds of resources you might use with it, how it actually might be functional within our district? Oh, well, we'll get to that. Mr. Foose wants to see the survey results. Yeah, there is one in every crowd here. Or two. All right, so moving forward, I gave you a little information earlier, but one of the things that's a really important component in talking with Dr. Bedden and trying to make this very relevant learning for what we're doing within the district, but we never want to forget the supports that we're able to provide to our district. And the school board, Boyer Area School District School Board, provides an awful lot of supports and potential opportunities for our district. So we decided to really think about how we would incorporate the work that we've done and give you kind of a template, a portal to help support your thinking when it comes to helping to support the district. So what we wanted to also provide you the opportunity to look at is the work that has happened throughout the district since we have embarked upon this new dashboard. And I brought on a few examples here from our school district. For those of you, back in one of the weekly updates, I think we talked about our data teams, but every summer, towards the end of the summer, the midpoint of August, we bring data teams from each building to really talk about what supports, what kinds of planning, what kinds of goals are they going to put in place for the upcoming school year. So I tried to find an example of, and not that I tried, that was difficult, but I provide an example of Middle School East and their social emotional learning action planning template, Middle School West, a math action planning template, Colbrookdale Elementary School, ELA, that's English Language Arts action planning template, as well as Central Office, the Office of Teaching and Learning, and this is going to be very new for Dr. Bedden to see for the first time tonight, how we are looking to incorporate that with our Office of Teaching and Learning and how we're going to utilize the same template to help frame our thinking to help support the district moving it forward. So we're not going to go into a lot of the details of what is actually in the planning tool, but you can see the hard work that's happened within the district to actually, for instance, here's Middle School East, back to the classroom, thinking in terms of being consistent. Now, I do apologize, school board members, and especially Mrs. Yusavich. We were projecting what the vision was based upon our work at that particular time, but we have changed it a little bit based upon the recommendations of the school board. So much of the information from the vision, we're missing a few words there, so I did not have them go back and change it. So that is not quite aligned with where we were based upon what was approved last week, but moving forward, we will make sure we update that. But can I make it larger? That's okay, yep. No problem. So looking at the top, you can see we look at our vision, we look at our mission. The building itself chose to highlight the specific goals that this action plan template, and I remind you that this is a climate and culture action plan. So when we look at social emotional learning, this really connects with that. So those are the 4 or 3 goals that they decide to relate to. We provide directions to them, and then what they do is they talk about how climate and culture building target every student is important and has a place in our community. And here's the specific work that they're working towards with respect to social emotional learning at Middle School East. If I go back to Middle School West. By the way, from the Office of Teaching and Learning perspective, we ask our buildings to have 3 specific focal points, one being social emotional learning, one being math related, and one being English language arts related. So I don't want you to think that Middle School East only has a social emotional component. I just tried to pull examples up so you can see what that looks like. But here's Middle School West. And here is, again, same linear process, looking at how we're aligning, having a math target. Students will learn the fundamental math skills to be successful across all content areas, and this is the information that they're providing in there and how that's going to look. One of the elements that I think is super critical, especially from the Office of Teaching and Learning perspective, is the bottom component here, professional learning needed. What kinds of support is required for us to allow this goal to be at the highest level of success possible? Colbrookdale's is an elementary school, obviously, and this is their English language arts. So if we wheel down here a little bit, they're looking to increase reading proficiency. Teachers will purposefully differentiate instruction through a balanced literacy approach. How do you like that, Dr. Barrow?
I love that.
So again, it just is a way that each building looks at their data over the summer, what their data tells them, and we have had our action planning process in years in the past, but this is the first time we've really had an opportunity to really bring it all closely aligned together, where everybody is working from that vision, mission, goal perspective, and really honing in on the specific areas of need.
Can I just ask a basic
Mhm.
education? What's the difference between summative and formative?
That's a great question. Summative results are typically your PSSA results that are kind of an accumulation of what happens in the end. Formative is assessment results that help guide your instructional planning process along the way. So if I'm doing probes along the way, that's going to give me formative information to help support instruction. Where summative, although I would argue sometimes that summative can be considered formative because we really do look at our PSSA results, but it's so somewhat antiquated in nature that is really just a snapshot of where kiddos are at that time. But great question.
Overly simplified for you from back in the day when we were in school, you would probably think of it as all your tests before you took your final exam.
Okay, so
All
summative
those,
would be the final
the
exam.
summative would be, for the simplified framework, would be like when you took your final.
Right, okay,
The exam would be summative, and then all those little
Gotcha.
other tests would be, should have been,
Right.
I should say, formative in process.
Gotcha.
Because the idea is if you didn't do well on a quarterly assessment per se, something should have changed to help you relearn, reteach, get better so that you would do well on the final.
Gotcha.
And Mrs. Denon,
Summation, formative, and form.
So, Mrs. Denon, one of the things I would say is, I'm not a proponent of utilizing, assessments over and over again, but I will tell you that my personal reflection is the fact that those who say we might assess too much probably aren't using their assessments to help drive where they need to support their kids instructionally. So I would agree with that. But if you're using your assessment data to help drive your instruction, it's a vital component to what helps your success in the classroom.
And so Mike will tell you he hit a sore spot for me because we talk about it all the time, and I agree. You could walk in and a warm-up exercise, just give 5 questions, and it has nothing to do with giving a kid a grade. It could be just for you to understand and activate prior knowledge to understand what is it they already know, so that I can actually make decisions on what I need to focus on, rather than teaching something they may already have an understanding of, and knowing that I may need to shift my lesson plan around for things that they may not know as well and spend more time on it. So again, to Mike's point, those assessments don't always have to be this deep, rigorous, make student pull their hair out type thing, if we use them the right way. And the challenge that we often run into with the criticism of them is if we don't get the information back in a timely manner so that they can be used to help get better, which is why it's also important that students get their grades back, which should be something that is telling them. So the value of a letter grade is supposed to really be a descriptor. So a lot of times school districts are doing away with letter grades and actually just did performance standards that actually give descriptors of what it is they should know and be able to do and how they're doing on it or not doing on it.
The last example that we have up here is the Office of Teaching and Learning, and again, this is new for us. So we're looking at helping to allow the greatest opportunity for success within our department. And I need to shift a little bit left here. But this is just looking at our future ready. If you remember in our district mission, we talk about future ready. And this is looking at how the Office of Teaching and Learning can help support that. And Dr. Bedden overall evaluates myself. I evaluate the members of the Office of Teaching and Learning. So we're trying to streamline our evaluative tool and create opportunities where there are matrix and color coordinated kind of things. And the formatting of this looks a little bit crazy because of the way it's stretched when it was uploaded. But really, career readiness standards and success with achievement growth, developing students that are future ready, including developing their SEL impact skills. And I think we talked about this a little bit with respect to prior conversations. We talk about the importance of soft skills. When Dr. Barrow and I were in Hershey back in December, one of the keynote speakers there talked about, I don't like the term soft skills, and I agree with that. I think we need to term them impact skills, because those skills are so impactful in the ability for our students to be successful, that those are the skills we sometimes forget to teach our students, that they're kind of assumed that kids will be able to handshake, to do those kinds of things that are just general social skills in nature. So again, just showing the alignment, this isn't here to really critique, but there's a lot of information on our form here of how we're looking at it. But the Office of Teaching and Learning is responsible for instruction across the district, so we're trying to make a tool that makes it user-friendly for us to be evaluated as a department. So another reason why all of our action planning components of our district are utilizing the same template based upon the work that has transpired over the summer, which moving forward, the hope is that the school board will actually utilize the same template to help create their own goals, to help support their decision of how they might support the district. Yes?
So just a couple comments looking at the work that's been done. Some comments on the work that's been done. First off, I want to applaud the team for focusing on, as you say, soft skills or impact skills, because I would tell you that's so important in the workforce. So most people can learn the content of the job, but if they don't have the leadership skills, the communication skills, etc., this, handshakes, basic interaction, teamwork, adaptability to change, things of that nature, they will not succeed. And I also was glad to see on the last one some targets. So there's actual numbers. I saw a lot of the matrix, but it's always good to have some numbers to achieve, even if it's a range, 3 to 5% improvement or whatever. So just thank you for sharing with us that. And at the end of the day, this whole alignment is going to be key. So thank you.
So moving forward, a reminder of what our new dashboard looks like, and specifically looking at what our 4 goals are at the bottom.
So last week we did, and it's a work in progress, the goals have now been placed in board docs. And it is, in board docs, you actually are supposed to be able to attach the agenda item to what goal it actually aligns with. So we'll be starting that process. So I did upload them and put them in there. And eventually you'll start seeing that. And then obviously in the agenda setting conversation, if we don't see it fits within a goal, then we should be sitting there saying, why are we even having this on the agenda? And it doesn't mean that, so there could be something of urgency that has to be, but for the most part it'll help make sure that you're doing work and making conversations, or being able to say to someone, this aligns with that goal. Eventually, if you use board docs the way it is and you developed eventually a strategic plan, which we are not quite, because we're trying to work out with the state what they say the comprehensive plan is going to look like before we do something else. So we're kind of in that limbo stage as a school district, because we got the, I don't know what you want to call it, grandfathered or extended evolution, because the state has identified, rightfully so, some of the challenges that districts have said about basically the CIP kind of gets done and then put on the shelf and nothing happens with it. But ultimately, if you had a strategic plan, or if the CIP, depending on how they modify it, you should be able to attach those goals and that plan to your board docs, and it actually will track your progress. And you can be able to show people how you're progressing on whatever those performance targets were developed inside the district. For us, at some point, it may actually be just attaching it to our future ready index. Potentially, we're not there, but the platform itself allows you to actually to generate a report on how your district as a whole is doing for its goals and any of the strategies and objectives that have been established.
Go ahead.
So do you want this to be really interactive at this point, or do you want to get to, or do you want to get through
If-
to a certain point?
There's only a couple more slides.
Okay.
Because I was targeting about an hour or so, because the actual creation of the action plan is going to be our next, where we kind of analyze our data.
Okay.
If you feel it's compelling to ask a question now, certainly ask it. If you can wait a couple slides, you can you can certainly wait a couple
All right,
slides.
I'll just ask one of my questions
Okay.
then. And that is there a plan to replace the places where this is on the wall with this in place?
It's interesting you should ask that question because I was asked a question by a building administrator today whether or not they should make copies and hand them out to the classrooms. And I said, put the brakes on a minute because we're not quite there yet. It was approved, and I even wrote something with letterhead today, and I changed the letterhead with the new information. And I kind of felt, oh boy, there's a lot to do here with respect to just the dynamics behind the scenes. But I'm gonna to pass that one on to Dr. Bedden to provide.
So actually, right,
Mhm.
so Allison is working on one, a communication plan to get it out. Two, we actually did have a conversation about all of the nuances with how you make this a living, breathing part of the district. So for example, my last district, you were not allowed to do any presentation on any other PowerPoint template other than the one the district provided. So every presentation, whether you're traveling or inside, had the same template. And guess what the template always had to start with? Yeah. For example, and I was actually at a school today, and the principal asked the same question, ironically, to me, and I said, slow down, because what I don't want is, I guess I want to digest and talk it and through with the rest of people who've been here before me and take the best of what have we done in the past and what I've seen done in others. I actually talked to parents, stood there for 30 minutes at the school who actually came from another district. Encouraged them to put their name in for the Parent Advisory Council because it would be nice to have another lens sitting there that came from somewhere else too, who, by the way, loves our district compared to other ones, but they can give some other insight. But I don't want it to end up being stuck on the wall and then nothing happens with it. And quite honestly, I said to them, they used to tell us in the military, we don't want you to memorize all this stuff for the sake of just memorizing it, but you need to go where to find it. But we want you to operationalize it. And there's a difference.
Yeah.
If you could never remember it, but you knew how to operationalize it, that was more important to the organization than it was just being able to regurgitate it, and then it meant nothing to you. Allison actually talked about the whole thing because I've given her a packet where we went through branding, the fact that the letterhead issue. We talked about we got to standardize our letterhead, for example, and then the difference would be just maybe the school's name on there versus, and the address change, but the format, everything needs to start so they know. We talked about being efficient and effective. We'd never sent anything out that wasn't computer generated, meaning we didn't buy this bulk of letterhead pre-printed that cost us a lot of money. We had a small portion of it for like official communication, but everything was generated off the computer, just standard paper. And you created a template of the letterhead on a computer and you could type right on it and then print it out, which saved much more money. And then it also allowed for the school, so for principal change, like if the principal's name's on there, we didn't have to go out and print a whole bunch of new letterhead. We just went in and typed the principal's new name. So there's a process and discussion that we're going through and trying to figure out how to get the biggest return on investment, but also to operationalize it. So for example, many have said that if you remember nothing else, maybe focus on remembering your vision first, which is why we were very important to make sure that we made it kind of a one-liner, that if you could say that and then you know how to go identify and find the goals. But the goals should be living and breathing, so if you keep doing them what you do, that's a natural working process that is more important than just memorizing it. So we are having those conversations. Again, principal asked me, I guess principal asked you, and then Allison actually spoke to me about it before she left, about trying to figure out what's the best way for us to roll this out.
Great. Thank you.
And just for instance, the dashboard itself with the top ribbon that goes with the beliefs doesn't have the vision. Like, that's very creative in what that does. So I think it warrants conversation about what the consistency is going to be with that. If it's just a replacement of the before mission statement and putting the vision there because of the the terminology change, or if we twist it a little bit. But those are all conversations we're going to have as far as what that's going to look like. So as we move forward, and we're getting to the tail end of our presentation tonight, these are the 4 BASD goals. Again, I'm not going to read them for you. You've seen them now multiple times. The focus of our October 1st meeting is going to be looking at our survey. A couple members of the school board were missing tonight. Perhaps there'll be an opportunity to get them caught up if we can give them the link so they can fill out the information. But we want to look at what did the results tell us, what trends do you see, and what questions you might have based upon our information. I'll take a moment. I did see some of you were cheating a little bit, and you were clicking on the results part of the form itself. So I'm going to go. I'll just do a quick response here. So this is what it looks like. So all 10 questions. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time because that's going to take away from our October 1st workshop. But you do have access to this if you want to get into your Google Classroom. But you can see as a school board how all 6 members of the school board responded to each question. And it is absolutely live data based upon what you just filled out. So Mrs. Denon, back to your point, I would say this is formative data to help support informing us of the decisions we can help to support our district. Now, one could argue that it's summative because you are looking at, it's a summation of what the school board compiles together. So you can twist that a little bit, but I think that's a relevant component to what we're looking at here. But as we go through our questions, I'll just, certain things might pop out more than others, but we will be looking at this data the next workshop to help decide how we're going to move forward with action planning.
So if I could, I would actually ask that you know what you put. We don't know because, and that was intentional because we didn't want it to become about people, but the collective. But I would say that for where I see things like fully, I hope that you could articulate how we do that. Because here's what I found out in my 16 plus years as a superintendent. Sometimes the answer to a question is incorrect, but sometimes it is correct and nobody knows that that's being done. If you know what I mean, that, I didn't know we did that. So one of the things that we're trying to think about and figure out is orientation. So like we got a potential for a large change in the board. And one of the things that good districts do is create an orientation process for board members that while they can't necessarily absorb and figure out everything all in one, like my last district, we created a binder that had a lot of, so they can refer over time in their first year because they're going to be enthralled right in the middle of the budget process, which I've always said is the craziest thing that we change in the middle of that, and they don't even get a chance to get adjusted to the job and they're thrown basically into the throes of it. But when I saw the results, it would be an interesting conversation where we see blue. Either what was the thinking, so it either is true or it reveals some misunderstanding.
Which one was blue?
Well, a couple of them had like
I mean, what did blue mean? That was the
fully
Fully
implemented, or sometimes it actually it's an awareness or lack thereof that someone knew about it and someone didn't know about it. So it brings about obviously an interesting and robust opportunity to dialogue and get also people on the same page.
So like Dr. Ben was making reference to, the focus of our workshop on October 1st will be what do the results tell us, what trends do you see, and what questions do you have? And I believe this is our last slide, but I wanted to just pull up again so you can kind of see what we're looking at. This is the action plan template, and now you all have access to this in the Google Classroom. I can make sure I put another copy of it with a weekly update as well. But it has all of our information with our new district vision. It has directions of kind of thinking process to help guide your thinking. We have a target area, depending on what that target area is. And then we have our strategy matrix that goes along with that. So the hope is by the time we leave our workshop a month from now, that we have some idea of, from a school board perspective, how we can utilize this action planning template to help support your decision-making process in the support of the Boyertown Area School District. And that is the end of our presentation for the evening.
Ideally, a couple things as we close out that obviously we're at a somewhat behind the power curve with regards to, by the time we get through this, we'll be sitting, late October, November, and some of these things. So ideally, now that we have this in place, we'll be trying to do this earlier, because part of what we're trying to do with the vertical alignment also is, here's what the board is talking about, here's what the superintendent is getting, here's what then it goes down to the cabinet, and then here's from there also, how does this fit with what are we deciding for the schools? And, obviously we made some predeterminations with ELA and math and SEL for the schools because they had to get going. But ideally, and so we're work in progress of trying to figure out timelines of how to make this work. And I will tell you, probably it will never work totally like we'd like to. Like we are struggling right now and talking to Mr. Stout that working on the whole budgetary process and aligning again with teaching and learning and how we spend money and trying to get that. And then there's the whole program of studies that he's sharing that by the time that comes, and then a timeline where there are things that honestly, which he's right, we've probably had the table that we would probably have done before, but with such a large potential shift with a large number of new board members, it would have not really been effective to kind of do it now, and then new board members never went through the process. So we're having to go step back, which you'll hear from me, Mr. Foose, and really look at our calendar, maybe change a couple things in the calendar process to help with some of those things. And the program of studies also impacts where we put money and getting that improved in a timely manner too. So that's probably one of the first big examples of, are we really going to offer these programs? And if we are, then that should be kind of what's driving approval or non-approval of expenditures and certain things. And the same thing looking at when we finally get the final results for our schools from the state, that will influence some conversations about where we need to invest money from an instructional standpoint with regards to our performance. Like we know, for the past couple of years, math has been a concern at the middle grades level. And if we can get that thing, that obviously influences how well students do in high school. But it's like a really anomaly that, I've come and seen and trying to struggle with compared to how they do in elementary. Then when it happens in middle, and then all of a sudden in certain places it kicks back up. And I do know there were some things that changed at the state level that contributed to it. But there's some things we need to do internally, which was alignment, first of all, that they've been working on. And if you understand what that means, is that we're making sure that we're teaching things in a sequence that make sure that kids are no one able to do certain things before they're assessed on it from the state level. If that makes sense, overly simplified, trying to make it simple. Is that a fair way?
That's a fair way to say.
Yeah, to keep it from getting too complicated for the general audience. Yeah. So we will be stumbling a little bit, is my point, as we try to get all this into place, and we're uncovering some timing things that will need you all to bear with us, is my point.
And just to add to Dr. Bedden's point is that we are working behind the scenes on a curriculum resource and review cycle, which is a 5-year plan to analyze where all of our instructional practices are in each content area. And while we would like to have it all mapped out and really figure out who needs resource, who needs instruction, who needs planning, who needs alignment, it's a lot. And I thank the board again for trusting in the fact when I took over in this opportunity and really kind of aligned what the needs of the department are. And, you trusted in the fact that we, I feel, made some effective decisions to help be more effective in what we're doing. There's a lot of really cool things happening behind the scenes, and I commend my Office of Teaching and Learning comrades in this because there's some positive things coming ahead. And if those changes wouldn't have happened a few months back with the realignment of resources, specifically human resources, that would have been a challenge for us. So thank you for that opportunity, because the fruits of what's happening are coming up. Unfortunately, we're catching up to some things, and like Dr. Bed made reference to, they're just not quite aligned as nicely as we would like, because when I talked to Dr. Foley about the program of study, they do student cards in January. So I obviously can't do a program of study presentation in January when we need to have it approved before January, but yet, we have this new resource cycle, we have the Future Ready Index coming out, there's a lot of pieces like Dr. Bedden was making reference to. So with that being said, I'll open up to any questions or comments.
I find it a little tricky when I think of the kind of things we've been faced with as a board over my almost 4 years here. Not that it doesn't seem exactly right to drive towards student outcomes, but I find it a little hard to conceptualize how we go from our goals to really changing or impacting student achievement. So I guess the question is, are there examples of good jobs done by boards that you might have, Dr. Bedden or Mr. Stout, that might help make that connection? Because sometimes I say, like, if I look back to the things we faced over the last few years, it's maybe sadly not enough directed towards student outcomes. It's more directed toward survival, as I see it. So I don't know if I haven't phrased that very eloquently, but I find it a little harder than perhaps like in a business situation where I can make changes by marketing or advertising or more efficient production, or things that I can understand better than I do with respect to education.
Right. I'm going to give you a quick example of how I think a big piece. We still have 100+ students that are out in the outside cyber world, and trying to figure out from a business perspective how to bring them back in. We've worked very hard, and I presented to the board in my previous position as well as my new position, although it's not so new anymore, but it still feels new. We are not really losing a lot of students out to cyber because we're providing, I believe, a wonderful opportunity in-house, but we're still not bringing students back. And for each one of those students that's out, we're losing potentially upwards of $10,000 per student that's out. So how does a board help to support that? How do we make decisions? We need to think from more of a business model of what is enticing, what's supportive to our students to have them want to come back to a Boyertown Area School District to get that prestigious Boyertown diploma.
Right, so I get that 100%. But right away my thinking is, okay, so you're going to save cash so you can put cash toward things that experienced educators can put toward student outcomes. To me, it's still a little bit on the economic side of life as opposed to, I know that the more cash we can help generate revenue-wise, that we can do more for the students, but it's still kind of indirect. When I think of all those matrices, it gets pretty.
So let me try and either not confuse it or clarify it. So one of the challenges when I listen to that example, the board identifying rightfully so, when you put the dollars to what 100 students costs us going outside, the return on investment and bringing them back. But what hasn't happened is, if that's a commitment, then the board's saying we will commit dollars to actually do that. So here's an example. If you turn on the radio or TV any given time, there's money put into advertising to take those students from us. So the fact that, in one way we're holding a line, but we're not gaining any ground. And, and Alice and I talked about this because this is one of the things on her plate is, so she kind of did a little soft, little bit, recruitment back. You may have seen it when she embedded the cyber stuff in the registration notice because we had to do that anyway. But yet we have not really aggressively said, if that's a priority, how do we got to market ourselves. That really to talking like a business, what is it that we have to offer that's different or competitive to what they're doing outside of the district? And one of the things, for instance, I said to her is, if they're leaving for religious and stuff like that, I can't compete with that because I can't touch it. I can't, by law, I can't do anything. But that cadre, when Mike and I talked, they're getting something also that we may not be giving, and we have to talk about, are we willing to give that resource or sweeten the pot a little bit? Because So we were trying to do the math conceptually. If I'm spending X dollars, how much of that savings can I invest back in the student to give them something extra that's better than what the person? But then the board support of that would be approving if we say we're going to put money in to promote and restructure this program to get them back. Because I'm going to capture X dollars that's going to go back in the budget. I'm just making this number up. I can't remember the number is, but if it was 10,000 kids, dollars we're losing, but I invested 2,000 of that to get them back, 1,000 into that kid, I still 7+ side is back in the budget that's helping everybody now in the district. That's kind of the thing we've been talking about as a conceptual example of.
I understand that completely. I just, well, again, I'm thinking like, okay, so now maybe we can analyze that we save, $55,000 in 1 year, but I'm still not taking that back to student achievement directly. So I'm only pointing out the complexity of trying to directly connect a lot of board activities to very specific student achievement. Not that it can't be done or anything. I'm just saying, so far the example is still, in my mind, more about
to add to this topic and
do things to get more money so that the experts can do better with the students. That's what I see.
Well, and one of the things that was an opportunity that was provided to myself in my role was to utilize Berks Online Learning to help support our cyber programming. And with that being said, we determined through our committee of people that was the most effective way to provide a comparable, if not more effective means at meeting the needs of our students. That can't happen without board support. So as Dr. Benton was making reference to the financial piece, but then you also have to be able to, and Mrs. Denon has spoken to this numerous times with Bill 4064, where if they provide Senate bill, if it's out there, and if 41, if we provide if this would pass and we provide a robust, comparable cyber program to those outside institutions, parents would have to pay for that outside institution. So again, all of that conversation, if we don't provide that instructional resource for our students here, which is driven by decisions of the whole, it's an opportunity that we wouldn't even be able to be considered to actually have that opportunity. So, yeah.
And I,
Think about full day kindergarten. The board is talking about full day kindergarten. That's an instruction, and we also know that it's desirable for our community. So it could be that if we decide that we talk about it, but if we decide that's a priority, then we need to build capacity to actually offer the program and staff it. That would be an example of the board saying, you all need to work and bring us a plan. And there's going to be some tough choices because you can't just make money, but it may be redirecting resources, or that money we get back could be targeted at building capacity to do that. So it's also, I think, the back end conversation of if we get the money back, how do we use it? And one example would be to fund full day kindergarten, for example, which has an instructional impact. The more we get them, the sooner we get them, the better we believe it is for academic purposes. So I think to your question, it may be more of us connecting the dots of if we got the savings or got the money, or it could be the funding of, like we talked about, the counselor ratio.
if I could just add on to that, I totally get what you're saying, and I've had the same question as well in terms of that. But I think from a board perspective, I think what Mr. Stout is talking about is what, as a board, what are our goals going to be, and how are our goals going to be aligned with the goals of the district. So it's from just an example of the cyber piece. There's different ways to approach that cyber piece, and the board actually gave direction to the superintendent and to the administration to put more of an effort into getting those kids back. Up until then, the effort was we thought we were going to put effort into getting some legislation passed. And of course, I think it's become very clear over the past couple of years that is not going to happen. So the legislative piece is not going to happen. So now the board has to change their focus to how are we going to do it. And I think the Berks Online piece is really great, because there's only so much that boards can do because of all the state mandates and the state laws and all that kind of stuff. So I think the whole piece about if we as a board can come together with our goals and then direct that to the administration, we can then be more effective. And I'll say the kindergarten piece is a perfect example. We were this close to having us 5 years ago for the administration to come up with a strategy for full day kindergarten. And it was voted down at a meeting, and it set us back about 5 years in having full day kindergarten. And I think that's because we did not really have a very good framework as a board as to what our goals were. We had the administration saying this would be a good, this would be good, this would be good, but we weren't functioning properly. And as a result of not functioning properly and not having our goals aligned, it was very difficult for the board to come together and direct the administration to have full day kindergarten. So I think, and I think that would be something that you could show increased achievement and increased, from a board action, that would show increased achievement. Now, of course, it's not going to be in 1 year, but that's kind of the big picture thing that I think about.
I guess my only point really is, even with respect to your example of all-day kindergarten, it's probably a great idea. And some of the research we've read a few years ago, there were a few counter papers presented as well. But as a board member, I still have to rely on the expertise of the educators in our administration to know fundamentally if they think it's a good idea, unless, and so how does the board measure itself, unless the administration knows how to measure and over what time frame you could get a reasonable measure of the hopefully a positive result from all-day kindergarten, how does the board, I was only expressing the difficulty in connecting the dots to true student achievement, that's all. We don't, there's no other disagreement here.
Don't get it wrong, Mr. Lewis, you're right, because
Probably
but
wasted
there are
time to
some,
go on much more.
No, you're actually making a very good point, because there's enough research out there that talks about the anecdotal connection, even at the superintendent level. You'll find it out there. But what they do find is that it's the board support and the superintendent support for things that are documented as best practice. For example, to have a sound, but as far as direct correlation, you're absolutely right. Most stuff you'll read will say we're pulled so far away, but it's the leadership and the direction that gets to then we build a plan and then it makes it happen.
Maybe where I'm going with this is I don't really see board goals versus district goals as much as I see goals. And the board has to help make sure that we fund the things and, where there are choices to make, we have to make that. But I guess that's where I'm struggling a little bit. Board goals versus your goals versus your goals. They should be the same goals as
Well, we hope that that's what we'll push down, because you actually touched on, if you look at most school codes, no matter what state you go to, the two biggest things that boards actually have the biggest control over is the funding and the people approval. And if you look at the accountability piece, one of the things that it talked about had to do with approving either the hiring and or removal of people based on, to your point, the recommendation of the superintendent. It's the funding of the initiatives, but the initiatives should be, I should be bringing things, if I'm asking you to spend money on it, that align with some established goals. So it's not just about, just because I like it, So you're saying a lot of the things, yeah, you are, yeah.
So I think one way that we as the board can set good district goals that help our students, that's the reason that the superintendent is the 10th person on the board, because we need that expertise. We can't do that ourselves. Another comment that you said earlier that I wasn't really reflected in the conversation was, I think it would be really helpful to see some very effective board in a school district that's making progress, and as an example, the action goals, because I love the way that you shared the action plan at the different schools, because that helps us think about what that might look like, but we need to raise it up to the board level. But I think if we could also see a couple examples from other school districts where they've actually attained that effective school board status, because I think we've like come close a couple times, but it just doesn't stick. And I think having this approach is really going to help us get there.
I think what's nice about this is all the work that you guys put in. Obviously, there was a lot of time and effort spent on that, and it creates a level of accountability. And I think us doing this, our piece as a board, provides a level of accountability for us as well. And the roles are all slightly different as you work your way through the organizational chart, because as was pointed out by Dr. Bedden, we primarily make a lot of hiring decisions and resource allocation. And I think to my colleague's point here, sometimes it's hard to see downstream, and sometimes very far downstream, how that gets applied in the classroom. And that's where us having some goals can really help bring that back for us, because we don't necessarily need to focus on the minutia and the granular decisions in each classroom. We need to focus on this kind of 50,000 foot view, where we're looking to enable educators and the administration, and also to hold them accountable for what they want to enable in the district, who is being empowered to make decisions, and also and a lot of that comes back to what our level of comfort as a board is, which is difficult to articulate when we have 9 different people without having kind of agreed upon goals, and the also the information and communication of that information, what we deem is acceptable to make a decision based on. And some of that comes with communication and trust, and that's going to vary. But if we have common goals to tie them to, and we say, well, based on this goal, do I feel like I have enough information to make this decision that we're driving toward successful achievement of one of these goals as a district? So I think it's a good thing for us to have in place. I think we've kind of been navigating all these waters for a long time, just based on a feel that whole idea, that concept of educators know best. That's your role. That's your employment. But as a board, what is our level of accountability, and what are we going to say we hope to achieve with these administrators and with these people that are making those decisions? So I think it'll be a good thing for collaboration and for accountability for us to finally flesh these out.
Yes, Mr. Foose made the point of 50,000 feet, and I think being on the board for 8 years, I think one of the challenges of boards is trying to stay at that 50,000 feet or foot level. Sometimes we get so ingrained in the minutia of the decision, and I think it's important that the decisions are made from a high level, and then looking at the effect of that decision in 3, 4, 5 years, or the effect of not making the decision and what that means in 3, 4, 5 years. And I think too many times the conversation or the presentation that's presented is the immediacy or the minutia of right now at this very moment. And yet I think any decision that we make, any board makes, it can affect something in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years from now. And there's a lot of times we don't look at that. So I think as we look at the goals, and I like the part about, informed data, informed decisions, and part of that data should be hey, if we do this now, what's that mean in 5 years? You know, whether it's a capital project thing, whether it's academic, a change in teaching and learning, what have you. And what does that mean? Not just today, but 3, 4, 5 years from now. And I think that would help us. Thank you.
Yeah, I think having goals for ourselves is really imperative so that, and it is, I've struggled too, like the superintendent's goals, our goals, the district's goals, aren't they all the same? But we have a responsibility and we need to be able to measure ourselves on that. And we never have. And you know, people say lots of things about us and right, and it can be right or it can be wrong, but a lot of times we know what the bigger picture was and what the goal is, but it's not necessarily written down somewhere. So the truth becomes whatever somebody says at that microphone or whatever some individual board member says. And having these goals will really help us move forward together. It will help us communicate to our community, and it will help us be accountable for what we say we're going to do. People can still disagree with what we say we want to do, but we will have that structure behind us and the rationale, and I think it's really important.
To Mr. Lewis's point, I hope you can pick it up. It's interesting though, you see this in his point, you could very well say nothing's gonna change and we're gonna make these us. But here's where it matters. Can you scroll down, Mike? So you could actually scroll back up. You could keep it, or you could actually take this and decide there is something important that we have an issue with regarding responsible and data-informed use of resources. So that could be a budgetary conversation. So for example, I talked about using less than $1 million of our fund balance. That would fit there. So you could actually say, we're gonna pick stuff that aligns with each of those and how we're gonna, as a board, say, we're gonna do what we can to support something. And then we go down here and talk about what is that gonna look like as a strategy. I'm just making it up. I think, we're gonna do whatever is in the board's control to support that goal. This is what we're going to do. You could talk about the positive, safe, and healthy learning. Well, you could say that in order for you to make sure that's happening, your strategy is that we're going to go out and visit schools and see the things that we ask the administration to do. So maybe, I'm just making this up, when we go to elementary school to do a board meeting, we're going to show up 30 minutes early to understand how that system that's supposed to be in place is actually working. We as board members are going to expect everybody's simple, inexpensive thing to wear their IDs. We're going to wear ours too. The board actually did something on their own to help promote safe and secure learning environment. You just adopted a policy that did that and applied it to yourself. You know what you just did? You did your own clearances. You modeled. That would have fit in that goal. You applied it to yourself to model it. So I just try to get some tangible, because it's also about, and Mr. Lewis is right, you may not can quantify the direct, but modeling also is a way also to create a culture in your district that contributes to all of that. The paper. Now we got counters on everybody's computer that shows how much paper they're printing. Effective use of resources. The board can say, we don't want any papers. Everything's going to be electronic. We got laptops. That's modeling. That's also supported in culture of efficiency and effectiveness.
Well, and just to add to that, Dr. Ben, just looking at the second district goal, provide a positive, safe, and healthy learning environment. Last board meeting, we gave a shout out to the work of the safety committee and the safety queen over there, who is providing more resource officers within our district. That is not able to happen without your support. The third bullet, looking at
MOU, you approved.
right. The third bullet, looking at that, as far as goals go, foster open communication. We're working on a communication plan with your approved support from a newly created position in collaboration with the foundation to help support communication throughout the district, which, by the way, going back to the cyber, going back to the role that Allison provides to us as a district, completely supports initiatives with our
Oh,
district.
and that's a great one, because Allison has been told too that she will be having to bring me metrics of data to show the return on investment for that position. I said to you when we first went this route of bringing it back, the contract of service, but we eventually need to own this. The foundation expects that. So you actually at some point will actually be getting, no, scroll back where you were, information on data on that position, what has it produced or not produced, and then you actually could say that when we bring you a plan to own it, because the foundation is trying to be a stopgap for us, whether you approve it or not. So that's an example of how the board could support not only, number one, by the data, by using what she shows, what has been the return on investment, what she's delivered, two, the third goal about fostering open and communication. I mean, there has been much more robust because someone's focusing on it and engaging. The website has much more change in pictures and what we see. Everyone will tell you that one of the first things in branding is your website. And if it stays static, people don't go back to it. But when they see it changing, they go back and look to see what's new. It's, you know, the whole, so, but which is also part of marketing, believe it or not. The better you communicate, the better your reputation is as a district, which then also influences people moving in to the district. Because we now have, I just looked at the latest update from Burke's, I forgot the Planning Commission. Well, they actually do have now some shift and movement in Burke's with growth. Now that's the county as a whole. We have a little small, not a lot here, but the county is now seeing some. And what's happening is you're finally getting some turnover with home sales and other things, because you've had a very stable community where people just stayed. Some of it, you know, things are changing. People, unpleasant thing, a part of life happened, but then now new people are moving in. But schools are part of that decision. But the parent I talked to today left that other district, I'm trying to be respectful of it and not say the name, and moved to us, and they're happy about what they're experiencing right now. Is everything perfect? No, but they feel like they've got an improvement from their last neighboring district that they were in. We had a parent who actually left Abington to come here also, and said they felt like this was better for them than Abington, wealthy Montgomery County, Abington, which I thought was interesting. And they had a hiccup, but guess what? I saw the message, the hiccup. Allison was able to call the person, reach out to them directly to assure them that this is not the norm. Explain the student information transition process, that it's a new system, and then the person was like, oh, well, that's normal when you go through a new implementation and migration. But then before, we wouldn't have had someone who'd been able to take time to do that.
Yes.
I think the other thing that having the board goals will do is give us something to reflect back on. So when we target these various goals, I mean, at the end of a year or at the end of a couple of years, when we reflect back on them, we really need to do the process of, you know, determining what we did to advance or hinder achievement of that goal. Was it a board issue? Were we inefficient? Did we not make decisions that guided us toward that? Or were we not provided with good choices or adequate choices? And do we need to adjust the goal? Like those types of thoughts need to go into, I think, the reflection and continuous evaluation of the board. And a good example would be, we rely on the administration and educators to bring us some of the different options, and we prioritize those as a board. But like Dr. Benton stated a number of times, he wanted to reduce the use of the fund balance to under $1 million. That was a goal of his, and he brought us a bunch of different ways he wanted to do that, the copier lease and various other things. We could have said no to all that. Does that mean that goal wasn't achieved because he didn't give us, like, that's where we need the reflective part. And if we have the goals in place, we can say, did we do something to achieve this, or were we hindering this goal? And I think, again, it gets back to accountability. So I think that's going to be an improvement for the board.
In my career experience, the hardest part is the metrics and defining something you can really measure. It's something we've struggled with in all my years where I am, and I don't know if that's also a case in education too, but that it seems to always be the part that we get stuck on.
I can suggest one for effective use of resources. Make sure our meetings only last 2 hours or less. Staff resource and time. The board actually directly controls that, the agenda and stuff.
I think back to Dr. Ben's point, looking at the trimester quarter targets, we want to be $1 million less in our fund balance. Your target is obviously that specific amount, but what's happening over the course of the year to actually, provide a reflection of evidence to support that we're making those decisions. So again, if our goal is to get students back from outside cyber, what does that look like and what are our targets? There's got to be a plan. Establish the plan. There's got to be an implementation. There's got to be a follow-up, and then there's going to be reflection. So just me saying that almost provides 4 targets along the way for that to happen. So I know from coming from a building principal of 10 years and being a special ed supervisor for 6 years prior to that, having targets really holds accountability. And I know I can tell you I often scored myself needing improvement in following up on it because it's so easy to walk away from because you don't actually bring the document up and reflect on it. You're doing things towards that, but to actually pull it up concretely in front of you to provide that evidence is often a struggle and a challenge like you made reference to. So I challenge the board, I challenge the administration, I challenge the buildings to hold their own accountability to make sure, and it's not a punitive kind of thing, but just that reminder, that reflection that you're going back and looking at those targets, it's critical to help support.
And one way we could do that is determine that at certain periods of time in our board meetings, we spend time looking back and seeing how we're doing.
I think that's a great idea. One thing that I would, caution the board on a little bit because this is new. There's going to be a turnover in the board coming up in the new year. Not creating too many action items so that you hold yourself accountable to a true, we may walk away from October 1st and you may have 10 things that you feel, but looking at, okay, well, what's number 1 and what's number 2 and maybe number 3 of what you do, because if you provide too many particular action items in there, the potential for not holding yourself accountable to even having the conversations about your evaluative piece of yourself could be a challenge.
And perhaps more importantly, we could set 1 million goals, but mostly the board, once again, the board isn't going to be doing these things for the most part. So there has to be an element of realism. Just for the record, I think goals are great. I think it's a great idea to be accountable. I just want to go back to, I guess I was spending too much time reading that document that Dr. Bedden sent out, the key, whatever, the key work of school boards. And everything in that whole accountability thing pointed directly to the student outcome. And that's all I was trying to make, is that goals are easy set and you can measure goals, but when it comes to, when I was reading this document, everything was pointing to like somehow we're supposed to be pointing right at the student outcome levels. And again, this conversation makes perfect sense and seems practical. I was only commenting that some of the esoteric stuff connecting directly to student performance is a little on the outside of what I think the board
And you're dead on,
is reasonably
Mr.
be
Lewis.
doing. That's all I'm saying.
You're dead on. I think that the 10 things that were listed on the accountability though from research, that if we are doing those, that's how, right. Right, so, and then providing the resources and support, and we'll always get back, so you're dead on, and there, again, there is no, you can actually physically do it like you're saying, but you just gotta know that over years and years of evolution, and again, boards staying out of day-to-day, also just holding us accountable, so we show you the outcomes of when you said yes to do this. Okay, now show me your targets and how we met them, so I can still support it. Yeah.
I just didn't want to leave with the idea that I wasn't supportive of setting up board goals and all that stuff.
Anybody?
So I just want to make sure I'm in sync here. Are we tonight trying to formulate something here?
No, so October 1st, this was
'Cause
intended
I'm
to be.
hearing some discussion in that regard, but not,
The intent of
Okay.
tonight's Education, Technology, and Student Services first ever committee meeting was to make it more of a workshop approach, so we could have these productive conversations. And then looking at the next meeting on October 1st to look at this action planning template and really try to create a few areas of focus for you as a school board. I'm envisioning, like Mr. Lewis was talking about, perhaps those conversations will draw some of those connections to really create more relevance in how it really can help to support student achievement, because on the surface it is a challenge to really think about that. But that workshop on October 1st, we may come away with an agreement that we've got one item that we're going to focus on. And that's going to be one area we're going to create a metrics of success, and we're going to have quarterly or trimester targets along the way to really just kind of, for lack of a better term, practice and see how we can hold ourselves all accountable to it. The school board's going to transition over in the very near future. There's going to be new stakeholders involved potentially. So it's going to be an ongoing living, breathing document like we ask our buildings to have. So the goal of the next workshop approach is going to be to have some information on this action planning template.
Before that, should go, upcoming meeting dates are all on our website, so I don't have them in front of me. But basically, every Tuesday night, we're here, so, yes, go ahead.
I was hoping that in this week's packet, I would get last week's packet with all this information so I can look at it, because it's too much to sit here and digest, and I can't stand looking at a computer screen all the time.
I will make sure that all of the information that hasn't been given and this newly finished PowerPoint presentation is part of this week's packet.
Thank you.
Yep.
And one last thing, I want to hand something over for Dr. Bedden. I have done a right-to-know request that I'm handing in to him for information that I've been trying to get. So I would appreciate that to go to him so I can get my information. Thank you.
What it is, but I will tell you that if we don't have it already developed, just know the right to know does not require us to go produce it. So without knowing this, if we have it, you're entitled to it, but if I think what I think it is, there's a lot of confusion about what you're asking for, and
It's on the classroom utilization. I kind of spelled
But
out
you-
what I want in there.
okay, well then that will help, because utilization can be everything from, are you saying how many kids are in every class to what we use the classroom for? Okay, because that's just a room assignment and a grade level assignment versus utilization could have been how many kids are actually in each of those classes.
Well, I guess I kind of broke it down a little bit more. I know we have kindergarten through 5th grade in the rooms, but are any of the rooms being used for music or art or phys ed or
Okay,
special needs? Yeah. there's so many things out there that I don't know what, like I know
Okay.
Washington's used for something, I know Coperdale's used for something. So,
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, motion to adjourn. Ms. Niner, second. Mr. Bruce?